If you're in the market for a dishwasher or a fridge, you'll soon be paying more, thanks to U.S. tariffs. Just as we thought the tariff roller coaster was slowing down, the U.S. Commerce Department announced the 50% steel tariffs will be expanded to include, quote, steel derivative products next week. This, as Trump said, he's planning on reaching out to trading partner countries with offers of unilateral tariff rates.
At a certain point, we're just going to send letters out. And I think you understand that, saying this is the deal. You can take it or you can leave it. You don't have to use it. You don't have to shop in the United States.
Joining us now is Dominic LeBlanc, Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade. Nice to see you, Minister.
Hi, Mercedes. Congratulations and good luck on the upcoming maternity leave.
Thank you very much. You are my final interview before my maternity leave, my final show. You and General air today.
Well, I wish you well.
I wish you well on the tariffs, which I know you'll continue to work on while I am away dealing with this.
Maybe
you may have a tougher job.
Then, Mercedes.
You've been dealing with the U.S. going back and forth to Washington, working on this. It seemed like we had, some good progress. And then Donald Trump announces more tariffs that are now going to make things like dishwashers and dryers cost more money. How is that negotiation going?
It's going. We're, as you said, going back and forth. The conversations remain frequent and constructive is sort of the bureaucratic phrase, but we don't have the outcome we want yet, and we're obviously anxious to get there. Canadians, Canadian business leaders, workers are living in great uncertainty. You referenced an increase, a doubling of the tariffs on steel and aluminum, hugely punitive for the steel and aluminum industry in Canada, very destructive for the American economy as well. So I'm hopeful we'll get there, but it's not fast enough. I mean, these tariffs should never have been put in place. Canada was one of a very few countries that actually retaliated in a significant way, but that also is not without challenge for the Canadian economy. So we're trying to get this to a conclusion as quickly as possible. The Prime Minister is going to see President Trump at the G7, of course, so it'll be an opportunity to continue that conversation.
Do you think anything significant will be achieved in terms of agreement at that G7? Because we've heard rumors circulating about an alleged draft agreement, and then it wasn't a draft agreement, and questions about whether the U.S. would get first dibs on Canadian critical minerals from another report. Are you anywhere near the meat of a deal?
So in those kind of discussions, there are obviously drafts of different documents. To say agreement has a technical legal term, I think one has to be prudent. People understand these things often in a very technical way. Experts will opine on an exchange of documents, and I just think we have to be careful not to be overly precise. But of course, in conversations with Secretary Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary of the United States, Ambassador Greer, who's their trade representative, Kirsten Hillman and I, our ambassador in Washington, and I, have gone back and forth. The President has spoken with the Prime Minister on a number of occasions, some of them informally on a range of issues. Those conversations, my understanding, aren't exclusively on one particular subject. So, look, I'm eternally optimistic, Mercedes. You've known me for some time. I'm kind of a cheerful, optimistic person and believe that the economic damage the Americans are doing to themselves will at one point force a change in policy. But we understand the reasonable frustration of Canadian businesses and workers. So if we conclude in the short period of time that we're not close to a deal, obviously, as we've said, the country will look at what might be further measures to retaliate against that doubling of the steel and aluminum tariffs.
So is the G7 sort of the deadline to decide on those retaliatory tariffs and whether they go up?
Deadline, again, is a technical word. These things, my limited experience in these conversations with the Americans is the goalposts sort of move around quite a bit. Our hope was that we would have made more progress before the President arrives in Alberta for the G7. We haven't yet hit that sweet spot. So we're not putting like hard, firm deadlines, but I've been saying to Secretary Lutnick, and I know that conversation has been shared with other American leaders, like if we don't get to a situation where that unjust and illegal tariffs are lifted on the Canadian economy, we can work together on joint security, defense initiatives. We can deal with some of the non-market practices of China dumping products in the North American economy. Those are the things we can do with the Americans, but not at the same time as they're hammering our economy with these punitive tariffs.
So it's sort of a security deal off the table until, I know the Americans talk about being part of the trade deal, but until there's something to do with those tariffs. I spoke to the American ambassador at an event in Ottawa where I interviewed him last week, and he was talking about, the border's basically good now, which was the initial supposed reason for the tariffs. Right. And he mentioned things like joint bases in the Canadian North potentially, or more NORAD bases in northern states. There was that big announcement on defense and security that a lot of people suspected might be connected to this negotiation. Can you speak to that?
So they're connected in the sense, Mercedes, the Prime Minister during the election spoke about a mandate to renegotiate a security and economic partnership with the Americans. The sort of assumption that they were a reliable, dependable economic partner has sort of been lost now. Canadians, I think, understand that we can't rely in terms of our prosperity and export opportunities in the way we previously may have on that market. Intertwined with that, the Prime Minister has said, is obviously a desire to increase our own defense and security posture to ensure that we're both meeting the NATO standard, but to ensure also that we're carrying our part in the continental security of North America. So those are conversations that are constructive and positive with the Americans, but at the same time, they're not the only potential supplier of defense equipment. The Europeans are making massive investments, well over $1 trillion Canadian dollars, in European defense. So our obvious desire is to work on that partnership with the Americans, but again, at the same time as they're hammering our automobile, steel and aluminum sector, those border tariffs you referenced for the fentanyl and illegal migration, which has, thank God, been massively, massively reduced, if not resolved. Why would those tariffs and the threat of those tariffs still remain in place? You
get picked often to be the problem solver, and you're known, widely known around Ottawa for your charm and your humor, and you've been sent to talk to the Trump administration. So I would love to know about what your strategy is for, you're taking obviously a tough line, but how you approach that with the Trump administration in terms of tone.
Well, the tone has to be collaborative and constructive. I mean, they are our most important trading and economic trading and security partner. And geography will mean that that's always the case. So my approach, being belligerent or sort of confrontational in a way that's not particularly constructive, I don't think advances the case. The Americans, we hope and believe, will change these decisions because it's in their economic and security interest to do so.
Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has been invited to the G7. You know a lot about national security. I've had national security sources who are very critical of that. They say that India is still not collaborating in RCMP investigations into the death and violence against Canadian citizens. Global News last week reported that the RCMP and CSIS discovered that Jagmeet Singh was being surveilled by a suspected agent of the Indian government who'd been known to take direction from the past and was connected to a criminal gang that had been used by the Indian government to conduct violence in Canada in the past. That raised a lot of concerns in the Sikh community, as you can imagine, especially because this is a federal party leader. Why do you feel comfortable with inviting Narendra Modi to the G7?
So you raised a number of troubling security issues that have occupied people's attention over probably the last couple of years or more so. Obviously, the security of party leaders and potential threats against them are something the RCMP manage properly and don't discuss publicly, but people take note of the security posture with respect to Mr. Singh. I may have been public security minister during some of those conversations. I think the Prime Minister said it well, Mercedes. This is his responsibility as chair of the G7 is to have a conversation around economic security involving things like critical minerals, involving new and emerging markets that are in the interest of G7 partners. So an invitation like that to a significant economic player in the person of the Prime Minister of India is not unusual. That being said, the Prime Minister also said that there are investigations that are properly in the hands of police authorities and perhaps ultimately prosecutors, if that's where these things go, that also can exist at the same time as a conversation takes place around economic and global security issues. So we think that that's a reasonable decision to take. And I think it's also important to assure and reassure the Sikh community in Canada that all of the accountabilities for some of, and the Commissioner of the RCMP, you'll remember, in an unprecedented way on a Thanksgiving weekend had a news conference to warn about some of this foreign interference, including potential threats of violence. So all of that stands. The RCMP, in my view, do terrific work in dealing with this, and that work continues as well.
Minister LeBlanc, great to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, and good luck this fall.
Thank you.